right, so welcome to everyone online. Thank you for joining us this evening. I'm Professor Viv Wathrich, and it's my pleasure to be introducing our speaker today, Dr Jess Belcher. But before we begin, I just wanted to acknowledge the country of the traditional owners of the lands on which we are meeting tonight across Australia. I particularly want to acknowledge the lands of the Macquarie University land, and that is the Wallumattagal clan of the Darug Nation, whose cultures and customs have nurtured and continue to nurture this land since the dream time. I pay my respects to elders past, present and future. I'm very excited about our webinar topic for tonight, and for many of you this is the start of a Year 12 journey today, and for some of you are already preparing or in the Year 11 journey, let's say. So through this webinar tonight, Dr Belcher is going to draw on some of the current research that we have been doing here at Macquarie to talk about why students feel stressed, what stress looks like, when it's normal, when it's not normal, and when parents really need to worry about their teens' levels of stress. Dr Belcher is also very importantly going to talk to us about some helpful tips on what parents can do to help their teenager to manage the stress through these final years of schools. So Dr Belcher is a member of our Lifespan Health and Wellbeing Research Centre at Macquarie University. She has a Bachelor of Arts majoring in psychology with an honours degree, a Masters of Clinical Psychology and a PhD in Clinical Psychology. So she's very equipped to talk to us today about how we might manage stress for Year 12 and Year 11 students. So a lot of her research at the moment is really focused on high school students and understanding why some students struggle with academic stress and how we can best help students to cope through these final years. So just before we get started, just a little bit of housekeeping first of all. So this session is being recorded, so you will be able to actually access this presentation in about a week. So we'll actually send you a link to this recording through the email that you registered to attend this webinar with. We will also be popping this webinar up on our Lifespan Health and Wellbeing website, so you'll be able to go back and actually view it from there as well. So thanks to those of you who already sent in questions. We're going to try and answer those questions, hopefully within the presentation itself or afterwards. If you have some questions that come up throughout this webinar, please use the question and answer function. So at the bottom of your screen, you'll see there is a chat message function. Don't use that one, please. Use the Q&A box there, type in your question, and I will moderate the questions at the end and put those through to Dr. Belcher. So that is it from me. So over to Jess for a presentation. Thank you.
Thanks, Viv. And Professor Wathrich is actually the mastermind behind a lot of what I'm talking about. So I'm very lucky to have her here tonight to introduce me. Let's get started because I've got a bit to get through. So obviously we know that stress, and in particular Year 11 and 12, is quite stressful Obviously, we know that the school and Year 11 and 12 is quite stressful for students. There was a survey done by Mission Australia, and it was done in 2023, showing that around 49% of youth reported that their biggest personal challenge was school. So we know that school is stressful for students. And they reported that it was the high workload, academic pressure, challenges with teachers, and learning difficulties, which were the most stressful about school. And one of the top barriers, they said, that was to achieving study goals was their mental health. So just wanted you to think a little bit about what solutions your student or adolescent would suggest to overcome these difficulties with school or these challenges. They asked the students in the survey what solutions they would come up with. And there were 4 things that students suggested that they would like. And that was a greater understanding from teachers and parents about stress levels, being more comfortable asking for support and advice, studying harder and more effectively, and being more organised and managing their time effectively. So all of these points relate directly to things that parents can help with, and so it's really great that you've come tonight. So I'm going to talk first about what is stress. So give you a bit of a definition, why stress is experienced, and also talk about normal versus concerning stress. So Lazarus and Volkman have defined stress as when a person perceives that they lack the ability or resources to cope with a situation in their environment that's important to their well-being. And so school or study stress can be defined as when a student perceives they lack the ability or resources to cope with a situation to do with schooling. So that's assessments or exams, and they see this as important to their well-being. So in other words, they perceive the situation as a threat. And when the situation is perceived as a threat, then our body's fight or flight system is activated. So the fight or flight response is natural, and it's a response to that perceived threat. It's controlled by the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system. The sympathetic nervous system releases energy and prepares the body for fight or flight, and the parasympathetic nervous system returns the body to a relaxed state. So although your teen is not in physical danger, like this man here, if they perceive threat, even if it's psychological, their body prepares them for danger. And so this is why they experience symptoms of stress. I won't go through all of these, but for example, when the fight or flight response or the parasympathetic nervous system is activated, breathing rate increases to provide more oxygen to the muscles. So that's why they might feel dizzy or lightheaded. Their mind becomes alert to danger. So they might feel a little bit on edge, have difficulty sleeping, feel fatigued. Their digestion slows down. So their blood is redirected to muscles so that they can fight or flight. That's why they might have more of a low appetite, upset stomach, diarrhea, constipation. So is all stress bad? Well, that's a yes or no. So stress leads to that state of readiness that's activated by the fight or flight system. And so because it's this natural and necessary response, it encourages us to seek out the resources or ability to cope. So it motivates us to prepare. But that said, too much stress for too long, which we call chronic stress, can be debilitating. So it can cause physical and mental health problems. So it's about finding a balance, and the research is really clear on this balance. This is the Yerkes-Dodson law. So basically it suggests that there's an optimal level of stress for somebody to perform at their best. So too little stress can affect overall motivation, and it might lead to procrastination or not the ability not to focus, whereas too much stress can also negatively affect our ability to perform. So we really want to have that optimal or normal level of stress. One of our recent studies across 7 different schools in New South Wales, we found that around 30% had that really high or extremely severe level of stress. And although that sounds like quite a big chunk, most of the year group were coping quite well with the stress of school. So what is normal and when do we need to worry? As you might have gathered, normal stress is that temporary stress in response to a stressor, so school or study or exams coming up, and it's up to a moderate level. Your teen or your student should be mostly not stressed, and definitely not more stressed than their peers. And they need to have that level of stress where they can still distract themselves. It's not all-consuming. We'd be concerned if the student had stress that just wouldn't go away, was stopping them from doing things. They were more stressed than their peers. It impacts their schoolwork, friendships, family life. They might avoid doing things that their peers can do, so exams, speeches. They might seem unhappy or be frequently distressed, and they might worry all the time, have poor concentration when they're worrying, so headaches, stomach aches, poor sleep. So next, I'm going to talk to you about why some students are more stressed than others. And this is a complex question that's continually being researched. But what we can gather is there are biological factors, behavioural factors, cognitive factors, and environmental factors. And so I'm going to take you through this, because if we understand the why, then that can better help us to help the students and understand what we can do. Firstly, with biological factors. So there is a moderate genetic vulnerability to anxiety and stress. And the research shows us that some people are just, they are just more vulnerable. So you're 3 to 4 times the chance of having an anxiety or stress-related disorder if a first-degree relative has one. And females tend to show higher levels of stress, anxiety, and depression than boys throughout the Year 12 period. So what can you do about this? I guess it's that vulnerability. So you yourself would know if there's that family history, and you just need to recognize if they are more prone to pay attention and try to pick up on the signs of stress a little bit earlier, check in on them, and then if they are struggling, get help. So in terms of behavioural factors, when people are faced with stress, they react in different ways. And some of these reactions can worsen stress, whereas some can improve stress. And so some of the more unhelpful ways in which people can respond to stress might be poor time management. So, and one of those poor time management strategies might be to overcommit. So they say yes to a lot of different things, which leaves them not a lot of time to pay attention to schoolwork and study. They might have a poor life-study balance. So they might be doing more outside of school, too much study, and that's leading to more stress because they're not able to calm down, relax, and have a good perspective. Perfectionistic behaviours as well, so spending way too much time on insignificant aspects of projects, which then comes at the expense of being able to finish the assessments or finish studying for exams. There's also self-handicapping behaviours. So sometimes when people are really stressed, they'll procrastinate, which then means that they put off finishing or working on assignments or studying for exams. And then that leads to a lot of stress right before it's due because they don't have enough time. They might also avoid, which also goes hand in hand with procrastination, and then sabotage. So sometimes students might just say, oh, I'm not going to try very hard because they don't want to fail when they've tried. So they kind of sabotage themselves so that they haven't put in the effort and can blame it on that. And then there are poor lifestyle habits, so poor sleep, diet, and limited exercise, which all contribute to higher stress. Cognitive factors, so negative thinking styles. Adolescents or teens and people in general who are more stressed tend to have a more negative thinking style, and this is one of those main causal and maintenance factors involved in heightened stress. So they believe that their world is full of negatives and that they don't have that ability to cope with stress. And in fact, the research suggests that that absence of negative thinking style is actually a protective factor and is associated with lower stress in HSC students in particular. And absence of negative thinking was the largest contributor over and above gender, individual resilience, peer, school and family connectedness in one study. So I'll spend a little bit of time talking about what we can do around this unhelpful or negative thinking later on. In terms of environmental factors, peer, family and school connectedness. So family factors such as lack of family support. So if the teen perceives that there's a lack of family support, that their parents have excessive expectations of them, or that their parents are very critical of them, those factors have been shown to drive up stress in the students. And in some of the current research that we're doing, it appears that if students are perceiving their parent as being more critical, then they're having that higher rise in stress levels over the HSC period. Peer and school factors. So if students are less satisfied with their peer relationships, or they have lower school connectedness, they feel less connected with their school, then that has been shown to increase stress or go hand in hand with higher stress in HSC students. And a lower peer connectedness was a stronger predictor of distress than family or school. So it was that peers, the peers that were the strongest predictor. And then there's fear appeals, and fear appeals are quite interesting because they seem to be something that is given across the board for our year 11 and 12 students. And it's that attempt by parents and teachers to motivate students by highlighting the consequences of doing poorly. So that might be where teachers or parents are saying, you know, you've got to try really hard or you'll get nowhere, you won't get a good mark, you won't be able to get into university. So they're really highlighting those negative consequences. And the impact of fear appeals on exam performance is mixed. And actually, fear appeals can motivate some students, but for anxiety-prone students, it results in increased worry, distress, and can decrease their exam performance. So the research is mixed in that area. So now to what parents can do. So I'm going to talk a bit about building connection, encouraging stress-reducing behaviours, challenging those unhelpful thoughts, managing your expectations as parents, and then I'll ask you to pass on some tips for managing stress to your students or teams. So I'm a strong believer in building and maintaining connection with your teen as a way to help them deal with stress. And this was one of the things in the national survey that students wanted. They wanted to be more comfortable asking for advice from parents and for the parents to have a better understanding of what they were going through. So we can achieve that through building connection. The first thing that I would suggest is to be collaborative. So not dictating what your student should do, but talking to them about it and coming up with solutions and coming up with goals together. Encourage responsibility and independence by listening supportively. So giving them the space to talk about how they're feeling and what's going on for them. Don't try to solve problems before they've had a chance to talk it through and come up with some solutions themselves. Don't nag. So nagging them to study won't help. So we need to motivate them to want to do it themselves. And one thing that can help with nagging is talking to them about it before it becomes a problem. So try and come up with some solutions. And we can motivate them as well by praising when they do solve problems for themselves and put in a lot of effort. So focusing on the positives, pulling them up when they're doing well rather than when they're not doing well. Another really good way to connect with your teen is to set up or keep family rituals going. So whether this is, I don't know, Taco Tuesday or a movie night at home together one night, or even a walk in the afternoon when they get home from school. So some sort of ritual where there's time for you to connect, either as a family, one-on-one, or one-on-one. And understanding that this is a difficult period for your teen is important. So as I said before, just keeping clued in on when they are struggling and identifying when they need help, and then getting them help as soon as possible, either at your GP, psychologist. Another way that parents can help is encouraging stress-reducing behaviours. So sleep is really important. A good sleep routine will enable learning to be consolidated, and a good sleep routine will be a wind down time, so reading a book or listening to some relaxing music, having a shower, and going off to bed. Encouraging 8 hours a night is important, so getting enough sleep. I think that, you know, those hours differ for everyone, but finding what works for your teen is important. If sleep through the morning is a problem, so again, not nagging, but discussing and agreeing what time you should get them out of bed in the morning, or they should set an alarm to get out of bed in the morning, so that you're not asking them to get out of bed constantly. Providing and encouraging healthy eating and nutritious food. So it's important to both facilitate and model this. So stock the cupboard with healthy foods, ask them what they would like to eat, and then allowing them access to that. And so one thing that I like the idea of is, if they are studying and you realise that they've been studying for a while, asking if you can prepare them a healthy snack and maybe bringing that to them or eating it with them. And then there's structuring time and space. So we want to help them to structure their time, possibly using a timetable. And I think building a timetable with them is a really nice thing to do together, or just suggesting for them to do it themselves. Setting up a space for them to work that is suitable is also important, or helping them to organise their existing space. So if they don't have a space, a set space where they study, helping them find one, or suggesting places where they could go if there's not one at home. Here's an example of a timetable. This is a really helpful strategy. So I wanted to spend a little bit more time on this and show you an example. And this example is probably really good for year 11, but maybe not so much year 12 that are going to exams now, because they're not mostly at school. But what I really wanted to hone in on is the way or the steps we take to create this timetable. So we want to break the day down into hours, which helps demonstrate that they can fit everything in. It can be quite an epiphany when you do this with students. They think, I have no time, and then all of a sudden they've got all these hours that they've got to fill up, and it can seem like, oh, actually I have time to fit in this study. And it's particularly helpful when they're coming up to their HSC exams. So start filling in the must-do activities first. Sleep, meals, extracurricular activities, and then add in assessment and exam dates that you know of, and you can work back from there. So encourage breaks after study. So socializing, device time, relaxation, hobbies, exercise, they're all things that can be done after a block of study. And encourage them to have no devices when they're studying. That's really important. And as I said, build in rewards after study. Socializing is an important behaviour that they can do that will reduce stress. It's feeling connected to their peers, and at this developmental period, their peers are really important to them, and they're all going through a similar thing. So it can really help to lower that stress level. It'll also help your child to maintain, connection with friends who are supportive, and you can. You might know of friends that are more supportive than others, and just encourage them to keep in contact with the ones that make them feel good. Hobbies. So allowing them to engage in things that bring joy and mastery is particularly important, especially if they're struggling a bit with their HSC or exams. encourage them to participate in extracurricular activities also that they enjoy. Regular exercise. So exercise actually releases feel-good endorphins, and it can help burn off some of that cortisol that builds up when people are stressed. So the more vigorous, the better. And there's lots of different exercise routines that people like to do. So maybe they play a team sport, which is great because that's socializing and exercise together. Or maybe it's something where they like to clear their mind and get out of the house on their own. Okay, so the unhelpful thinking or the negative thinking. What we want to do for our students is try to minimize unhelpful thoughts. And we want to think about how students can change the way that they're thinking if they are thinking negatively about the HSC. So as you can see in this picture, there's one person, life's full of opportunities, I can solve my problems. The other person is saying, well, life's full of obstacles, I can't solve my problems. So one's probably going to have an easier time than the other with those outlooks. And students who are really stressed tend to have this processing bias where they're thinking bad things will happen, they're thinking disasters, they think others expect them to be perfect, they think that they can't cope with their emotions or they can't cope with stress. And so we want to help them to think in a more realistic way. Some common unhelpful or unrealistic thoughts for students who are coming up to exams might be, I have to remember everything, or if I don't do well, I won't get anywhere. So we want to be aware of these thoughts. These might be a good reference for you. So one of the ways in which we can improve thinking in students who are quite stressed or are prone to having that bias to think more negatively is through challenging thoughts. So this is a cognitive model of stress. And basically what it's saying is that an event doesn't cause emotions. So the event of drafting an English essay for trial exams doesn't cause stress, anxiety, frustration, or annoyance. Thoughts are what lead to emotions. So what thoughts might lead to the emotions listed here? Well, unhelpful or unrealistic thoughts. So those thoughts that focus on the negative and underestimate someone's ability to cope. So these are some example thoughts. I don't know where to start. I don't know how to do this. I don't have enough time to do this, as well as that maths assessment that's due a few days later. They might be thinking, I'm going to fail. And those thoughts are making them feel stressed, anxious, frustrated, and annoyed when they're drafting that English essay. So there are some questions that you can ask your team or that they can ask themselves to try and get at, firstly, what they are thinking in response to an event, and that can get them to challenge those thoughts a little. So when we're trying to identify the thought, you might ask, well, what are you thinking, or what are you saying to yourself that's making you think that you're in danger here? What's upsetting you? What are you thinking? And then you can ask your team, so are you really in danger? Like, what's going to happen here? What usually happens? How has this played out in the past? Will it really be as bad as I think? So there's a list of questions. So take a screenshot of this slide if you like. These are questions that you can ask your team when they're really stressed. We want to encourage them to look for evidence that shows that their thoughts are true and evidence that show that their thoughts are not true. So if there's something niggling, oh yeah, but there was that one assignment back 2 years ago when I didn't do so well. We want to hear that because we don't want that niggling at them. And we're not trying here to get rid of stress. We're just trying to lower it to be at a more manageable level. So this won't take the stress away, but it should help. Here's the example. So up the top is the unhelpful thoughts that somebody's having in relation to their exam. And then if we ask them, well, will it really be as bad as you think? Yes, it is. It's hard, but I still have some time to do something. Can you find a way to cope with this situation? Well, I can make an outline today, and then maybe I'll do some math later. What advice would you give to a friend? Well, I can only do what I can do with the time I have. And are other students in the same situation? What happens to other people? And they might say, well, actually, there's a lot of other people feeling like this. So then we ask them to come up with like, well, what's a more helpful thought? And it might be, well, this is hard, but a lot of other students are feeling overwhelmed. I'll just do the best with what time I have. And so thinking that, even if they don't believe it, writing that down or talking through it, hopefully makes them feel a little bit less stressed and anxious and a bit motivated to start doing something. So these are just some unhelpful thoughts, because a lot of the time, especially with these final exams, there are unhelpful thoughts about the future. So not only about the exams, but that, if I don't do well, then this is going to happen. So here are some helpful reminders that you can tell your students and teens. There are lots of career choices. Going to the workforce is a really great option too if you need a break. Many private colleges offer courses that go directly into university after you complete them. Lots of successful people didn't do well at school, and that's a really important one because often or they know people who are successful who haven't done amazingly at school. And another thing that you can do as a parent is definitely to manage your own expectations. So create that supportive environment by reducing pressure. We want to be realistic. So it's probably not realistic to think that your team's going to get 99.9 if previously they've been getting 80 or something like that. So just trying to keep it realistic. They might, but not putting that pressure on. Don't get caught up in your own thinking. So sometimes parents can think, they won't get anywhere in life if they don't do well. They're avoiding this on purpose. So really putting the blame on them. Or if they don't get a good mark, they won't get a good job. So just remembering that there is life beyond school, and to try and help your adolescent to keep this in perspective as well. We want to talk positively about the future. So it's not all about exams and marks. And facilitate and model that good life work balance. So having downtime and not saying that you've had your piano practice or your flute lesson, so that's downtime. Now study is now important. We want to give them some real downtime, doing things that they would like to do. It's also good to challenge your teen. So sometimes parents, and especially anxious parents, can encourage their teens to avoid stressful situations. So they might email the teacher and ask them if they can get out of something or try to solve stressful situations for them. I think it's really important to keep in mind that fears are maintained by avoidance. So asking your child or your teen what you can do to help, or creating a plan of how they can practice to prepare, and getting them to, if they're scared of something, to face it anyway is really important. And then definitely, if they do face a fear, even if it's only a small one, praising their behavior. I noticed that you were really worried about that, but you did it anyway. That's fantastic. And finally, I have some study tips for students. So really want you to take note of these, pass them on to your team because there's some really great ones in here. So first one would be making a list and breaking tasks down. Sometimes it can be really overwhelming thinking, I've got to study for history. And that's a really big thing to study for. Write out maybe what they want to achieve in a study period. So I'm going to review week one's history or this chapter in the textbook in this study period, and coming up with a plan and crossing things off can be quite rewarding for students. Creating that study schedule, so making a time to schedule in the study using the timetable. and then having breaks for set periods as well. Using rewards, so rewarding for study. So, oh, I did an hour of study, I'm allowed a bit of TV time now. And for teens who have trouble getting into study, trouble getting started, study grazing is really good. So studying for 10 minutes, I'm just going to study for a little bit and then I'm going to have a break, and doing that repeatedly until they get into it. Switch to a different study or task location. So maybe they're having trouble focusing at home. Maybe they could go to the library and try and study there. Allocating realistic timeframes. Procrastinators need to not start too late. Perfectionists need to keep realistic timeframes and work through their work quicker. Writing drafts, and then managing distracting technology are important tips for kids. So here are some resources for managing exam stress and anxiety. A lot of the tips and information that I've given you tonight come from the Study Without Stress program, and that's a really great program that was created by Professor Wotheridge. It's available from the Emotional Health Clinic as an individual treatment, but also in schools. So a lot of schools at the moment do run this program. And the QR code is there if you'd like to read more about it or contact the Emotional Health Clinic. There are some downloadable fact sheets as well that have been created, and they're on the New South Wales Government website. And these are exam tips for, managing exam tips and tricks for both students, schools, and parents. So just to sum up, so stress is common and normal, but it should fluctuate and it should not impede performance. And what can you do to help your child manage it? So building connection and working collaboratively. Encourage stress-reducing behaviours, so adequate sleep, nutrition, structuring their time are really important. Remember that unhelpful thinking leads to stress, not the situation itself. So try and help your team to challenge any unhelpful thinking. Keep your own expectations and emotions in check, and don't give in to your own anxiety, as well as passing on the study tips to your team. So I've mentioned a few times, getting your student help. So I've suggested there is the Emotional Health Clinic with the Study Without Stress program, but in general, stress that's chronic, or if a student is more stressed than peers and it's impacting broadly on their life, you can go to the school counsellor. So they're a really important first contact. And then you can go to the GP for a referral to a psychologist, and cognitive behavioural therapy is that gold standard treatment for stress and anxiety related issues. Thank you. That's the end of the show. So I think thank you for joining tonight. It's been a pleasure.